I want to thank you and the Life Raft group for the privilege of inviting me to give these awards in my husband's name. I thought I was going to be able to hold this together, but after seeing the video, I'm not sure I'm going to make it back. So, Allan was a man who took charge from the moment you met him. That included when we first met. That was back in the early 60s, and Allan was on a panel discussing the pros of premarital sex. I was in the audience objecting to all of those comments. He finally asked someone who the short girl with the big mouth was. When the panel discussion was over, he asked me out to stop the continuation of the discussion after the meeting. Providing for his family, helping his friends and family, and volunteering was his life. When we were first married, I worked for a school for emotionally impaired children. When I left the school, Allan became a board member and watched it grow from a school with a budget of $250,000 to a community mental health agency with a budget now well over $10 million. He volunteered as the treasurer, president, and negotiated the purchase of 3 buildings so that the agency could grow. This was done all during his free time. After he died, the agency asked the funeral procession to pass the buildings he helped obtain. As the cortege proceeded to the cemetery, outside each building stood all of the employees and many of the consumers, saluting this wonderful man who had helped them have a better site in which to meet and grow. After Allan had his heart attack, he became active with the American Heart Association and became a state board member for the state affiliate. He helped them reorganize their internal organization so that it would run more efficiently. When a couples organization through the B'nai B'rith was organized, Allan worked as treasurer and then became president, as well as working on several committees to keep the organizations running. Every Thursday night, he, and sometimes we, helped run a bingo game to raise funds for the projects that the organization used for outreach community activities. Allan was also on a board for a state organization developing halfway houses and job development for people coming out of incarceration. He was on the board for the State Hearing Impaired Association. The list of his many other contributions to our community could continue, but you would eventually say that he could not have done everything I would tell you. There couldn't be enough time. He was a friend to the young and to an elderly gentleman from the cardiac rehab program, which Allan attended 3 mornings a week, getting up at 5:30 so that he could be at a 6:30 class. With this friend who had lost his wife a few years before Allan was diagnosed with GIST, one day Allan came home and said, "I won't be home for dinner tomorrow, Kendra. My friend, his health is failing." I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I am taking him to the cemetery." The cemetery was 5 hours away. He took 2 tanks of oxygen, because at that time he was on oxygen, because of the just impeding his ability to breathe. And he took his friend from cardiac rehab to see his wife for the last time, and he then died 3 months later. Should it sound that Allan neglected his family and friends to do the work, you would be mistaken. He watched our daughter dance any chance he had and went to hers and everyone else's recitals. He was a soccer and a softball coach. He took the children and then our son-in-law to the football games. Football was his passion. He was still waiting for the Lions to win. Because he was a CPA and he was gone for many hours during tax season, Allan would take each child on a 4-day trip alone to wherever they wanted to go within driving distance of our home. One exception was when my daughter turned 16. He took her to New York on a shopping trip. He waited outside and sat on fire hydrants while she shopped. Every time Allan and I passed a construction site, I always said that someday I wanted to drive a backhoe to see what it was like. For my birthday the year before he died, he arranged with a friend who was in construction for me to drive a backhoe and move the dirt from one area to the other. And there Allan stood with his oxygen tank, encouraging me to move that dirt. Allan loved the water, and we always had a ski boat that he adored and had the patience of Job teaching all the kids to ski. And there were many of our children's friends and our friends' children. He did finally have to give up with me. I was a lost cause. Then Allan was diagnosed with a cyst. Do you think our life changed? Yes. Did Allan change? No. He researched help and found the Life Raft group. Since there was no support group in Michigan, he contacted Norman and wanted the names of the patients that were known in our area. He contacted Gilda's Club and arranged to use their facility. He began setting up meetings and people began to come. They were thankful for a place to meet and know where there were others who shared their concerns and fears. When people called out from out of state about GIST and had seen his name, he spent many hours making recommendations and seeing them through the process. Excuse me. He would come home from work exhausted, but returned all phone calls from GIST patients as well as all of the other volunteer organizations that called and needed his input, including his friends and his family who called as well. He would go all over the U.S. to sit at meetings with the Life Raft Board to help with whatever he could so that this loving and supportive organization would be able to continue and hopefully help the doctors find a cure before too many more people succumb to the ravages of this disease. Allan was a fighter. If he believed that something was not right, he would fight until there was no other alternative. The day I brought him home from the hospital, I found myself running around the hospital because he wanted to make sure that if he was a candidate for one of the new drugs being tested, he wanted all the paperwork to be ready so he could start that day. He told the people at hospice that he would not sign up unless they let him continue his quest for a cure. I just need to share an anecdote to let you know what a fighter Allan was. We were scheduled to go on a cruise before Allan became too weak and needed to be in hospice. When the hospice worker asked Allan what they could do for him, he said that he was going on the cruise, no matter what. It was his favorite vacation. And he needed help with that. When I told Allan that he needed the oxygen, he told the hospice worker, "Get me that oxygen." Then I told him that he needed to sleep in an upright position because of his breathing. He said fine, that he would sleep on a deck chair and there I was to sleep there with him. That's the way it was going to be, and there was no other discussion. When Allan was brought home from the hospital, people began calling in to come and see him. There were never less than 30 people coming and going for the few days that he was alive at home. One friend came into the house the afternoon before Allan died and told me that he had been stopped by an Orthodox rabbi who lived down the street. The rabbi asked if there was a shiva taking place. For those of you who don't know what a shiva is in the Jewish religion, it's the time of mourning for friends and family to call. When the friend said no, that the people were coming to say goodbye to their dying friend, the rabbi said, "He must be a very special and blessed man," and indeed he was. I know that Allan would be honored to know that these awards bear his name, but he would be embarrassed for what he did. He did not do it for the recognition, but out of love for humankind. When I have told our family and friends the generosity of the organization for carrying on Allan's name, they all began to cry. There isn't a day that his name does not come up to remind us of the kind and generous man he was. My family and I want to thank you, the Life Raft Group, for this recognition, and want to congratulate the people who will be recognized for their time and generosity to this outstanding and loving organization.